Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Marcus observed Sarah in front of him, her eyes gleaming under the gentle candlelight. The kitchen was filled with the soothing aroma of the homemade marinara sauce he'd prepared, one of their customs over the years of their relationship. They had developed small rituals that transformed ordinary evenings into cherished memories, cooking together, taking their time selecting a bottle of wine, and concluding the night with lengthy conversations about everything and nothing. That was the type of bond Marcus treasured most, a peaceful intimacy built over time, where every glance and movement carried significance without requiring explanation. That evening everything seemed to follow the familiar routine. Dinner had been prepared with attention, the wine selected thoughtfully, and their conversation flowed with laughter and shared anecdotes. Marcus was discussing a challenging client at work while Sarah listened, resting her chin on her hand and smiling slightly. She enjoyed hearing him vent about the office. There was always a bit of drama in his descriptions that made her laugh. Then, in the midst of a comfortable pause, Sarah tilted her wine glass between her fingers and said in a casual tone, "So what if we invited Kevin to join us one of these nights?" The word struck Marcus like a sudden blow, shattering the cozy atmosphere. He blinked as if uncertain he'd heard her correctly. "What?" he asked with a confused laugh, waiting for her to clarify. Sarah raised an eyebrow, still smiling. "Yeah, Kevin. You know, just to make things a little more interesting." Silence stretched a moment longer than usual. Marcus let out a dry laugh, trying to play along with what felt like a strange joke. "Oh sure, because nothing says romantic evening like my best friend sitting at the table," he joked, pretending to feel more comfortable than he really was. Sarah swirled the wine in her glass, the red liquid moving hypnotically under the dim light. "I'm not talking about dinner," she clarified, an enigmatic smile on her lips. Marcus's glass hovered in midair for a moment before he slowly set it down on the table. His chest tightened slightly, an unexpected weight growing inside him. He knew Sarah well enough to realize her words were never random. She liked to test boundaries, to throw out little provocations and watch how people reacted. But something was different that night. It was subtle but impossible to ignore. "You're kidding, right?" he asked, forcing a carefree tone. Sarah smiled but didn't answer immediately. She just watched him for a moment, long enough for an uncomfortable doubt to start creeping into his mind. "Maybe," she finally said, taking a sip of wine without looking away from him. Marcus tried to laugh again, but the sound came out strained. "Oh great, because I was about to ask if you've been drinking too much wine lately." Sarah let out a quick laugh as if amused by his reaction. "Relax, babe. It's just an idea." But the idea lingered between them like a shadow over the perfectly set table. Marcus tried to keep the conversation light after that, but something inside him couldn't return to how it was before. It was as if a small knot had formed in his chest, tightening each time Sarah gave him one of those mysterious looks. The evening went on with more wine and conversations that tried unsuccessfully to regain their earlier ease, but what had been said couldn't be taken back. Sarah's words still echoed in Marcus's mind, slipping in like a persistent whisper he couldn't ignore. And for the first time in a long while, he felt he didn't completely know the woman in front of him. The next day he woke to the sound of rain tapping on the window. The room was dim and calm, but something inside him felt out of place. Marcus turned over in bed, feeling the gentle warmth of Sarah beside him. She was sleeping deeply, her hair sprawled across the pillow, her breathing slow and steady. He watched her for a moment, looking for any hint of the previous night in her sleeping face. Nothing, no sign of restlessness, no trace that something different had happened. But inside him, that weight was still there. He closed his eyes, trying to ignore the thought that had been with him since dinner. After all, it was just a joke, right? He knew Sarah, he knew how she liked to tease, to toss words into the air just to see how people reacted. But there was something in the way she'd spoken, in the glimmer in her eyes, in how the silence had stretched afterward, something that kept him from dismissing it as a simple joke. He got up carefully, making sure not to wake her. In the hallway, the smell of fresh coffee was already drifting through the house. He went downstairs, still trying to organize his thoughts. The clock on the wall showed it was early, but he felt like he hadn't slept at all. In the kitchen, he made 2 cups of coffee, setting one on the table for Sarah. He sat down, holding his own mug and staring at the dark liquid. That question he was trying to avoid bubbled back up in his mind. What if we asked Kevin to join us? He swallowed hard. The door squeaked softly when Sarah came into the kitchen wearing a loose t-shirt and messy hair. She seemed calm, yawning as she picked up her cup of coffee without noticing Marcus's careful gaze. "You're up early," her voice still carried traces of sleep. Marcus forced a smile. "I didn't sleep much." She sipped her coffee, sitting down across from him. "Something wrong?" He studied her for a moment, looking for any sign that she was also thinking about it, but Sarah looked normal, as if last night had never happened. He hesitated briefly before speaking. "About what you said last night." Sarah looked up at him. "What about it?" He let out a short laugh, trying to ease the tension he felt. "You know. Kevin." She blinked as if trying to recall. "Oh." A hint of a smile appeared on her lips. Marcus waited. Sarah took another sip of coffee before continuing. "What about it?" A chill ran down his spine. "You were kidding, right?" She tilted her head, studying him like she was deciding what to say. "What if I wasn't?" Her response was casual, but it felt like a punch in the gut. Marcus blinked a few times, trying to figure out if she was just messing with him or if there was more to it. "So you were serious?" His voice sounded a bit tenser than he intended. Sarah smiled in a way that did nothing to calm his nerves. "Maybe, or maybe I just wanted to see how you'd react." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "But why?" She placed her cup down gently, folding her hands together. "Marcus, have you never thought about trying something new?" she asked in a light, almost innocent tone, but the effect on him was unsettling. "I'm not sure what you mean." She sighed as if explaining something obvious. "I mean, maybe stepping out of the ordinary, exploring new possibilities." The tension in Marcus's chest grew. "I thought we were doing fine." "We are," Sarah assured him, "but what if we could be even better?" He looked at her, trying to understand what was really going on behind those calm eyes. His coffee was getting cold, but he couldn't move. The house was quiet, but inside him something was screaming. Breakfast ended without any real answer. Sarah kept smiling, playing with words, but something had changed. The sense of normalcy Marcus was trying to hold on to had shattered right in front of him, like cracked glass on the verge of breaking completely. The days that followed were strangely quiet. There were no fights, no arguments, no direct confrontation, but the silence spoke louder than any word. Marcus felt Sarah's presence next to him, but the distance between them had never seemed so big before. Their days were filled with small moments of togetherness, shared looks at breakfast, silly messages throughout the day, the habit of curling up on the couch together watching a bad movie just to laugh. Now all of that felt forced. Marcus tried to act like everything was okay, but his mind kept returning again and again to that conversation. What if we could be better? The words echoed inside him. Better how? Better why? A few days later, during an impromptu dinner in the kitchen, Marcus realized just how much that shadow had settled between them. Sarah was slicing pieces of grilled chicken in silence while Marcus stared at his plate without appetite. He could sense the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. "You're different," she suddenly said without lifting her eyes. Marcus blinked, caught off guard. "Me?" She looked up and gave a slight smile, but there was something in her expression that made him shiver. "Yeah, you," she said, resting her silverware on her plate and leaning forward slightly. "Ever since that conversation." He forced a short laugh. Maybe because that conversation was unexpected. Sarah raised her eyebrows as if that was an overreaction. It was just an idea, Marcus. He put his utensils down and finally met her gaze. Was it? The silence that followed said more than any words could. She picked up her wine glass, running her finger around the rim. I just think sometimes we get stuck in a certain routine, and we forget there are other ways to live, to feel. Marcus felt a chill up his spine. Other ways to feel? Sarah took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. I'm saying maybe we're following a path that's too predictable. That doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means there might be something more. Something more? Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and that's when he realized what was really happening. It wasn't about Kevin, it never was. Sarah wasn't testing the boundaries of their relationship, she was testing her own heart. And Marcus wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. The house was quiet, filled only with the muffled sound of rain against the windows. Sarah came home from work, kicking off her shoes in the entryway, catching the unmistakable smell of pizza in the air. The scene she found in the living room looked like an invitation to a casual evening. The table was arranged with lit candles, wine glasses already poured, and a freshly opened pizza. Marcus was sitting on the couch, relaxed, sipping wine as though everything was normal. She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What's all this? Marcus gave her a smile that made her hesitate for a moment. Just dinner for the two of us, and well, for a guest. She frowned. A guest? He nodded casually. I thought about what you said about trying something new. A chill went through her. What do you mean? Marcus took another sip of wine before continuing, as if savoring not just the drink but the moment. I invited someone over to eat with us. The tension in the room became palpable. Who? She asked slowly, a mix of confusion and unease in her voice. He smiled. Rachel. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. What? Yes, your best friend. I figured it'd be a good place to start with this new idea you mentioned. Her mind spun. You've got to be kidding. He wasn't. His gaze stayed steady, firm, free of any hint of sarcasm. You wanted to explore something new. Why not start with someone you already know and trust? She tried to speak, but no words came out. The doorbell rang. Her blood ran cold. She looked at the door, then at Marcus, her mind in turmoil. You really invited Rachel? He stood up slowly, adjusting his shirt calmly before opening the door. He turned to her with a slight smile. Let's talk to her. After all, isn't this what you wanted? Sarah's face went pale, and in that moment, for the first time since this conversation started, Marcus saw something different in her eyes, fear. He opened the door slowly, and Rachel stepped inside. The silence in the room was suffocating. Sarah, still seated at the table, didn't move. Her best friend was now right in front of her, but instead of the excitement her earlier words had suggested, all that remained was a blank look. Marcus watched them both. He calmly picked up another slice of pizza like it was just another ordinary evening, but it wasn't. Sarah looked away, fiddling with her wine glass without really drinking from it. Rachel, sensing the strange atmosphere, hesitated. She glanced at both of them, trying to piece together whatever it was she was missing. Well, I appreciate the invitation to have dinner with you guys, but this is really awkward, she said, placing her napkin on the table and standing up. I think I'd better go. Marcus glanced at Sarah, waiting for her to say something, anything, to stop her or at least save the situation. But Sarah stayed silent. I'll walk you out, Marcus offered, getting up unhurriedly. He walked with Rachel, feeling the weight of the evening settle on his shoulders. At the door, he opened it and Rachel looked at him with curiosity and discomfort. What was that about? He sighed. Good question. She raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Good night, Marcus. Good night, Rachel. She left, and he closed the door. When he turned around, Sarah was still at the table, staring at her wine as if the liquid might hold the answers she was looking for. Marcus crossed his arms, tilting his head. I don't get it. You wanted to test our limits, and when we have the chance, you turn it down. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment before finally speaking in a near whisper. I'm sorry about everything. It was a crazy idea, and I regret it. He stood there watching her. After a few seconds, he picked up his car keys from the table. Sorry, but I'm going out with some friends tonight. I need to process all of this. Sarah raised her eyes to him, her expression full of emotions she couldn't quite name. Marcus gave a half smile, leaned in, and kissed her forehead. Don't wait up. He left, closing the door behind him. The bar was dark, stuffy, and filled with low chatter. Marcus took a seat at the counter, ordered a double whiskey, and lit a cigar. He breathed in deeply, feeling the burn of the alcohol slide down his throat and the smoke curl through his fingers. He didn't think about anything, or maybe he thought about everything, but when the last drop of whiskey was gone and the cigar had gone out in the ashtray, he knew what he had to do. The house was quiet when he got home. The lights were off, and the only thing breaking the darkness was the moonlight seeping through the windows. Marcus walked slowly to the bedroom. There, lying in bed, Sarah was waiting. Her eyes opened slowly when she heard his steps. He didn't say a word. Neither did she. He got closer, pulling back the sheets and sliding in. Her familiar scent was there, just like always. And that night they made love, no words, no past, just skin, warmth, and the silent reconnection of something that, despite everything, still existed. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.